Welcome to Mr. Holloway's Foundational Java Skills series. In this video, we're going to talk a little bit more about methods. But before we get started, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And class is now in session. In the previous video, we went over accessor methods or getter methods and setters. So basically getters and setters. And we talked about their strength and some of the things that we could do with them. In particular, it's to protect our data in something we call encapsulation. So when we actually call, we set a size, we just input an argument, and then we can get the size again. And so that's the proper way of accessing any kind of fields or attributes inside of a class. Now, this video, I just want to focus a little bit more on methods and specifically parameters and arguments, because I don't feel like I spent enough time there. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to be very generic here. I'm going to, let me just comment these out, and I'm going to focus on this method up here. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to do something else here. So right now I'm just going to keep this here. So parameters are the things that go inside of here. These are things that we pass into the method on the other side. So here's what I mean. So let's just do one parameter. So I'm going to say int, and I'm going to say, let's just call this item. We can call it item 1, and then I'm just going to print item 1. Okay, and then we'll do plus item. Keeping this very generic. And now I have one parameter here. Now when we call this on the other side, let's get rid of all of this. We're going to say, hey, here's a circle. We want to create a circle. So I'm going to say, well, we've created the circle, and now since we've created the circle, we have access to all of the methods. I'm going to say dot, and I think, okay, here we go. So it's called my method, and notice it gives us the code hinting, and it says it expects one argument. So on this side, we call them arguments. So let's put an argument in there, and it has to be an int. So I'm just going to put 10. Okay, and we're done. So that is one argument that we put in, and then on the other side, we call this a, here it is, item 1. Sorry about that. Okay, so on this side, this is called a parameter. All right, so let's just run this. So we're just going to call this my method here on this side, or from outside of the class, and we should print item 1. All right, now let's add another parameter. Actually, let's do this. This part defines the type of data that we need to put in the method. So if I were to do something like this, if I put a string in and I said, Bob, all right, we're already getting an error. And the reason why we get this error is because the data type is not correct. So we're passing this into the method, and it tells us string cannot be converted to an int. So coming back to the method definition, it expects an int. So we have to put an int. Now what we could do is we can add an additional argument here that we can put in. So I'm just going to leave this here. So what we could do here is let's add a second parameter on this side. So I'm going to say string, and then we could say name, and then actually to be consistent, we'll just say item 2, and I'll just print this out right here, and we're going to, instead of printing item 1, we're going to say item 2. All right, so now we have two parameters, which one has to be an int, the other one has to be a string. And when we come on this side, notice we already have an error, and that's because it recognizes that the my method requires 2 arguments. So I need to do just a comma, and this is going to be a string. So I'll just put Bob. All right, and when we run this now, we will get both of these printed out. Okay, let's add a third parameter, and this time let's do a boolean. So I'm going to say boolean, and we'll say item 3, and these are just again, these are just variable names. So I can name this whatever I want. I could be X, Y, and Z. It could be whatever. So I'm just using item for demonstration purposes. So now we're going to print out item 3. And we'll change this to this. So now this becomes a method that requires 3 parameters, or 3 arguments on the other side. We call these parameters. So the definition has 3 parameters. And notice I'm already getting an error, and I could just put true. Okay, so now I've put the 3 arguments inside of the method, and I can run it. And we should get the result where we'll have item 1, 2, and 3. So there it is. All right. Now the last thing I want to cover is something called overloading. We've talked about this with our constructors. And so we have 2 constructors here. So when we make a circle, we can just call a circle, or we can make a circle where it requires us to input an argument because of this one parameter. So we're going to do the same thing with the my method, but I'm just going to do this real simple. So we'll just kind of leave this one here. So now I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to keep this. So we'll keep item. And so now we have 2 my methods. So we have one here and we have one here. But the difference is that when we call this one, it requires 3 arguments. When we call this one, it only requires 1. So now I'm going to say circle dot my method, and this time I'm going to just call it with 1 argument. Okay. So we shouldn't get any errors because we've overloaded this method, and it's just going to accept the 3 arguments here and the 1 argument here, and we should be okay. So we shouldn't get the error that we had before. So as we run it, let me clear this out, and we'll run it again. And item 1 is 20, and that item 120 comes from this first overloaded method. Now watch what happens if we put 2. So let's just put 2. So let's say I'm going to put something here like 24. Okay, so there is no method definition that requires us to put in 2 arguments. So either put in 1 or we put in 3, and so that's not going to be allowed. All right, so that's going to pretty much cover this video. I wanted to just focus more on the parameters, specifically the arguments and overloading. So that concludes this video. I will see you in the next video where we're going to talk about static methods.